Shabbat Shalom. Are the Jews a chosen people? This is one of the most difficult questions contained within our Torah and our liturgy, but it is not something that we should shy away from discussing. Not at all. Not because we're so great, actually because a conversation about chosenness forces us to look deeply at who we are and what we are meant to do. This morning, I want to think about this as we look at our Parsha Ki Tavo and begin to understand our responsibility in the world. This morning, Fisher read, "The Lord your God commands you this day to observe these laws and rules. Observe them faithfully with all your heart and soul. You have affirmed this day that the Lord is your God, that you will walk in his ways, that you will observe his laws and commandments, and that you will obey him. And the Lord has affirmed this day that you are, as he promised you, his cherished people, who shall observe all his commandments, and that he will choose you in fame and renown and glory, high above all the nations that he has made, and that you shall be, as he promised, a holy people to the Lord your God." This is heavy stuff. Taken out of context, we might read only the part that God is looking at us as a treasured people who were chosen. But we need to read all of the verses. It's not just about that one verse. As JTS scholar Hillel Ben Sasson wrote, in this context, it is crucial to note how being above all the nation entails fame, reputation, and glory. High status indeed, but a status that does not actually include automatically bequeathed benefits. Quite to the contrary, being above other nations is equated with being a holy nation. And what is a holy nation? That we learn from the holiness code in Leviticus. A holy nation is not only a community that abides by the highest moral standards, it is a people who actively strive in a never-ending progress toward the idea of perfection, to become holy like God, God's self. A careful reading of the paragraph enveloping the chosenness statement discussed lends support to the notion that Jewish particularism is anything but chauvinistic and ought to rather be viewed as an uncompromisingly higher moral standard. We must hold ourselves up if we are going to have this title of being chosen and treasured. So if that's where we're headed, how do we understand that? Let's go back to the beginning, to Parshat Breshit, which we read many months ago, and yet we will encounter in just a few weeks after we finish the fall high holidays. You will see that Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, were created in the image of God. And we know that there is no specific religion ascribed to Adam. Rather, they are representatives of humanity writ large. When we celebrate creation, it is not about the Jews. It is about everybody. That all humans are descended from one mother and one father, and rightly understood by the rabbis, intended to teach this basic equality of the entire human race. This was articulated then in the statement in the Mishnah that there was only one being, Adam, that was created, so that no one could say, "My father is greater than your father." Rabbi Reuven Hammer, who passed away just about a month ago, teaches that deviations from this basic principle, such as the teaching found in some mystical circles that Jewish souls are somehow purer or superior to others, are in fact contradictions to Judaism's normative teaching and should be rejected as such. As Jews, we believe that we have a task that we are set out to do, and we can accomplish much of that task by the observance of mitzvot, which include both ritual and ethical behaviors. As Jews, I also believe that we must have the theological humility to recognize that although God does have a distinct and sacred relationship with us, one in which we are commanded to follow the laws of the covenant, God can access people in other modes, including language, other faiths, and reason. We need to find ways to access God so that God is a part of our worldly conversation, but not to use this idea to infringe upon the rights and beliefs of others. You see, Rabbi Hammer says that chosenness is indeed a difficult and mysterious doctrine which can be distorted. On one hand, it is so integral to Judaism that it cannot be easily dismissed. Rightly understood, it defines us and our task, but never let it be distorted in such a way as to contradict Judaism's other basic belief, the oneness and equality of all human beings. So to understand it, I want to go back to the paragraph from our Parsha, as well as some other psukim verses from our Parsha, to enable us to understand how to live out this paradox of being chosen for something. This Parsha puts a mirror to our face, and therefore our actions cause us to ask, what do we see as our responsibility to others and to God if we are to take up this mantle of chosenness? To answer this, I look at three parts of our Parsha. What must we do? First, we must act with a sense of compassion and generosity. We read this morning, when you have set aside in full the 10th part of your yield in the 3rd year, the year of the tithe, and have given it to the Levite, the stranger, the orphan, and the widow, that they may eat their fill in your settlements. This is a reminder that there are those who are vulnerable in our midst, and we must help lift them up. If we are truly chosen, that means we are chosen for something, and that is to help others. The Torah prescribes a giving of the 10th of our yield. That's one way. Fisher this morning already shared with us ways that he has been helping. He has committed time and funds to Masbia, the organization who helps do what these psukim say, eat. The next text shows us that if we are privileged enough to feel as though we are a treasure, we have a responsibility as well. We see the Jewish people often step up at moments when those that are vulnerable have been beaten down. I was proud to be able to share last week 2 organizations, Israel Aid and Afia, who are based in Israel and here in New York, working to bring medical supplies, food, and help to the devastated areas of the Bahamas. These organizations demonstrate how to live out the commitment of helping the most vulnerable, whether they're members of the Jewish community or not. We, as members of the Jewish community, are proud that we can point to organizations that are connected to Israel and the Jewish community and see that happening. Simultaneously, we often feel great shame when Jewish names or Jewish organizations are associated with moments of great pain and abuse. Those lists are also too long to name, but we must take a moment to realize that none of us is so chosen, so treasured to take part in the abuse of others. The second way that this parsha commands us to live up to our status of being chosen is through meaningful ritual engagement. We can't just say that we are Jews, we must act like Jews. What does this look like? When you enter the land that the Lord your God is giving you as a heritage and you possess it and you settle it, you shall take some of every first fruit of the soil, which you harvest from the land your God is giving you, put it in a basket, go to a place that the Lord your God will establish his name. You shall go to the priest in charge at that time and say to him, and acknowledge this day before the Lord your God that I have entered the land that the Lord swore to our fathers. I love this. First, it speaks to the power of Israel as a sacred space. And I know that Fisher understands the sanctity of the land. As I shared earlier, I have had the honor of traveling with him not once but twice to the Jewish homeland. We walked through the Kotel tunnels, we made chocolate, we climbed Masada, we learned the stories of our people. But further in these psukim, we are taught that we must go to a specific place to do our rituals. We know that in today's day and age, the sanctuary have replaced the altars that were erected thousands of years ago. Fisher is literally a child of this sanctuary, of this synagogue. For as long as I have been here, and I know for several years before that, Fisher grew up here. When I first started, Fisher would talk about Rabbi Schranz and his bow ties, and they would compare the ties that they would wear. And Fisher took on the mantle of often wearing bow ties in Rabbi Schranz's memory. Fisher, we've spent many Shabbatot together here in this sanctuary, and you have accepted the responsibility of what it means to be in relationship with God. Lastly, and probably the hardest, we are taught in this week's Parsha that we have affirmed this day that the Lord your God and we will walk in God's ways. What can this possibly mean? For this, I'd like to share a story that I learned just last week. It's a story about a man I never met, a man named Dave. This was told by a woman named Sarah. Dave drives a taxi in Manhattan, and he picked Sarah up from the Upper West Side near Central Park on a rainy morning in April. "Where to?" "Newark Airport, please," she said. Dave wore a suit, a little frayed, but good lines. He sat up straight, his hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. He was probably about 60 years old when he picked Sarah up on that rainy day in April. White hair, bushy eyebrows, and Jeff Goldblum glasses. He also wore a kippah. "Where are you flying?" he asked me. "Israel." "Oh, nice. You know, I give to AIPAC and the New Israel Fund. I love your country. We visit every year. My son is studying there right now at Hebrew University." "Wow, that's really cool." "Yeah, we like it. We're even thinking about making Aliyah. Kids are in college now, so we'll see." "How long have you been driving a taxi?" Sarah asked. "Since September 11th, 2002. You know, a year after 9/11. "What happened?" "I was in the North Tower. I'm a lawyer. I was late to a meeting because the taxi driver was new and got lost. This was before GPS, and the guy barely spoke English, and then the plane hit. And I was late because I was just getting to the building because the taxi driver got lost. I wasn't where I was supposed to be. Being late saved my life." "Oh my God," Sarah said. "It was a catastrophe. The smoke and the ashes, all the screaming. That was a crazy day." "It must have been a nightmare." "No, it was worse because we were awake. I still had my coffee in one hand and my briefcase in the other, and I couldn't let go of either of it. I just stood there like I grew roots. And then this young cop told me to move. So I did what I was told, and I just walked and I walked trying to find my wife, who was pregnant." "Was she okay?" "She was fine. She was home, not far from where I picked you up." His voice lowered. "I came home and I couldn't cope. I just couldn't cope. And she couldn't cope with me. And then she lost the baby. And it got worse, and I couldn't concentrate. The only thing that calmed me down was riding in taxis, because that driver had saved my life by being late. I just felt safe in taxis. So I would finish work and ride in them. Some guys drank too much to forget. Some gambled, some took drugs, some went to prostitutes. I rode in taxis." That must have been so hard. It was, but then my wife said to me in the middle of the night, "Why don't you quit your job and drive a taxi?" And then this warm feeling washed all over me. I knew it was what God wanted me to do. So I left the firm and became a taxi driver on the first anniversary of 9/11. "That's amazing," I said with a lump in my throat. It was just the right path. That taxi driver saved my life because of a matter of seconds and missing some stupid turn. But I believe it was God watching over me. Maybe I'll do the same for someone else. Dave looked up at the roof. God is in charge, but we are his partners here on earth. And this is what I'm meant to do. Hashem takes the wheel. We all need to take the wheel of our lives and of this world. We need to set ourselves on the right course. Tonight, we observe Slichot, and we are just a week away from Rosh Hashanah. If we haven't started looking closely at our behavior, it is time to start. We need to readjust. We can't assume that just because we are chosen for something great, that it will happen. It is on us to take up the mantle of responsibility. I know that Fisher will be able to do it. Will the rest of us? Shabbat Shalom.